So glad that you're all joining us for this adult education presentation. Beverly Copen has inspired audiences in programs around the world with her real life stories and strategies of overcoming difficult challenges and turning them into joyous triumphs. She is an author, photographer, entrepreneur, and I have to tell you, the best person to have at a party because everyone goes home knowing each other better because she has a talent for asking questions that bring out the absolute best in people. Many of you watching know her from her years living in the village of Oak Creek area of Sedona and being an activist to better our community. Beverly's going to share some personal stories about how she personally took risks. She asked, why not? And accomplished what others thought was impossible. At any time, as Jenny said, you can use the chat feature to write questions, and there'll be time later in the presentation for Beverly to respond to your questions. And now I am so very pleased to introduce my friend, Beverly Copen.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Alicia. I was thinking about, as you're talking, how this came about very, very simply, because it was maybe a couple of months ago when you and Donna Michaels were trying to figure out how to have a couple of days of presentations in the community, and you wanted me to come out to help do that. And so that became a little complicated, so we decided not to do that. But what you did is come up with this wonderful idea of doing something on a Zoom webinar, and that's very exciting. So I just wanted to explain that you and I talked about having a lot of books that I've written, 6 books actually, and you and I selected 3 of them to tell the story about not the content of the book, but the actual how it came to be. And so that's part of what we're going to be doing. And in each case, I'm going to try to remember to tell you um, how it can help you. That's the whole point. And if I don't, Rabbi will remind me to do that. So I'm ready to begin by telling you ever so briefly a little bit of my background of early years. I was 15 years old in Atlanta, Georgia, and was a sophomore in high school. And I had enough credits to actually skip the 11th grade. And I discussed this with mom. I didn't discuss it with her. I mentioned it to my mom, that I could actually go straight from the 10th grade to the 12th grade. And she said, why would you want to do that? And I said, why not? And so I did. I skipped the 11th grade. And then I went to college in Winter Park, Florida, Georgia, for 2 years. And then I realized what I really wanted to do was to learn journalism. And that was important. So I transferred to University of Georgia, uh, in in Athens, Georgia, for my last 2 years, and that was just fabulous because all of the skills that I've learned as a journalist, I've used all of my life, and one of those is asking questions and listening to the answer. So then the other thing I wanted to tell you in the background kind of thing is that I was now a little bit later, 2 or 3 years later after college, I was married and had my first son at home, and your son was 5 months old, and that's when I first started a business, my first business when he was 5 months old. I accidentally started it actually because I was helping a lady answer the telephone for her modeling agency called Models Incorporated. And after a few weeks of that, the lady said to me, I'm tired of doing this. Do you want the business? And I said, why not? And so I gave her $1 and took over the business. And the first thing I did was to change the name of the company to Atlanta Models and Talent. And I didn't have any background in how to do any of this, so I just used things that were logic. And so I ran Atlanta Models and Talent as the owner and president for 10 years. It did very, very, very well. We did a whole bunch of good stuff. And then decided that I was actually bored. And so I turned over the leadership of the company and I still owned it for another 5 years. Now here's the bottom line. Atlanta Models and Talent is now approximately in its 65th year of being in business. So that is kind of a fascinating piece of background. The whole idea here is to help people think of making a difference starts with I have an idea. And then the question is, do you have a good idea? Do you have good ideas? But then do you follow through on them? Because that's part of what makes things work. And how do you feel about risk? We're going to talk about risk because I took a lot of risk, but I'm going to help you to understand how to manage risk so you can know whether you want to do it or not.
So, why don't you tell us more about how you took some risks and came to that story about For Better or Worse, the book you wrote?
I can do that. I was, this is a very personal story. Um, I was married to Michael Kievman, and I was, I was 2 years into developing my new dream business um, of a woman helping women in business. And at the same time, Michael was very ill with diabetes and had already lost one leg in the hospital and was on moments away from the second leg, losing the second leg. And I was very torn, actually would be the word, because I had a little notebook like this, oh, here we go. A little tiny, yeah, there we go, a little notebook that I found around the house. And I started making notes into this little notebook of how my emotions were just jumping all over the place. And I guess part of what I was writing about is were very selfish things about how I was feeling and how this wasn't fair and I want to run away and things like that. And so I made sure that this little notebook was just for me. I would never share it with anyone. So that was happening, and I was trying to write a story called The Joy of the Journey, but it wasn't working. I got stuck. So I called my good friend in New York City, who is a very best-selling author, Carol Hyatt, and told her I was stuck. And she said, Beverly, the reason that you're stuck is because you're writing the wrong book. If you can write about how you're dealing with Michael, you have a story. And so I listened and I picked up my little private notebook and I went through the notes in that little private notebook. And from that little piece of information, I sat down at the computer and I wrote a title, I wrote a table of contents, and I wrote two sample chapters. And I sent them to Carol to look at, and she sent them to her literary agent. And an interesting and amazing situation happened after that. 2 or 3 weeks later, I received in the mail a contract offering me to write the book that I had sent them. And he sent me a check for commission, and all of a sudden, I'm an author. And that was just astonishing. So at the same time, so I started writing, and it was just wonderful. Now, at this point, I had another idea. Michael was really having a very, very bad time, and he really was having trouble wanting to live. And so I said to myself, I have to do something. But how would I do? I called I called the president of Cox Broadcasting, where Michael was working, and I said, I need to talk with you because we need to do something. And so I talked with him, and I said, I have an idea. Why don't we create an event for Michael? We'll call it Mike's Night. And I described what would be happening with Mike's Night. And he said, that sounds like a very good idea. I said, don't forget, we have to do this as a secret because if he knows, he won't come. So Bill Schwartz was the name, and he said, okay, I'll handle the party part. And you, Harry, you handle the part about Michael and make sure he stays alive to come to the party. So with that, we'll fast forward a little bit of time, not much, to the event of Mike's Night. Mike's Night was a big hotel in Atlanta, and Michael was going to be upstairs with me and Bill having a little cocktail while we waited for dinner to be had. What Michael did not know is that in the ballroom were assembled about 250 people of his friends, family, co-workers, and everything. And this was a fundraiser for the Diabetes Association. And a whole program was planned. So all of a sudden, Michael said, I mean, we were told that dinner is about ready. So come on downstairs. So you can put up the slide of Michael coming into yeah, that's it. That's it. That's it. That's Michael coming around the corner and seeing the 250 people. And it was so exciting. It was so exciting. They were screaming and yelling at him and giving him encouraging. And so we went through the whole wonderful program, and it was just really wonderful. And the closing of the program was going to be giving Michael the microphone. He was sitting at a table with a huge monitor, and so everybody could see him. He's, of course, in a wheelchair, and it looks like he has two legs because he now has two prostheses. So we giving him the microphone. We have three endings. The first ending is he can't do it. He just can't do it. The second ending is the option is he can start them talking on the microphone, but he can't finish. The third is who knows what's going to happen. So he picks up the microphone and he starts talking about the beautiful help that everyone gave him in the hospital, encouraging him to live. And it was just beautiful and so touching. And there wasn't a sound in the whole place. And then he said, I don't know if I'm ever going to walk again. And I don't even know if I'm ever going to stand up again. But I want you to know I'm going to try right now. He put the microphone down and he stood up, raising his hands in triumph. The place went wild. Everyone was screaming and crying. Everybody, even the waiters and waitresses were crying. And so it was just the most incredible scene. So I really felt like the big risk that I had with the president of Cox paid off, and we had an idea, and it had worked. So at that point, went up quickly to sign off and with a prayer, and just I felt like it made a difference. And so we went home, and we had four more. Michael lived for 4 more months, and in that time, we found him. We found us a handicap accessible place to live, a new home, and he had a little motorized tricycle that he could zoom around in, and it was just delightful. And then when one night he went to sleep and he didn't wake up. And now I was in the position of having to write the book and share my grief with during the process of writing the book. And then after I had finished that, it was time for me to reinvent and reimagine what my life was going to be like for my next chapter of my life.
What a moving story, Beverly. And I understand that that book on caregiving, for better or for worse, a couple's guide to dealing with chronic illness, was actually only the second book on caregiving a spouse ever done. That's quite an honor. Uh,
That's true. And the first book who had ever done on chronic illness was Jimmy Carter's wife, Rosalind Carter. She had written the first book on caregiving.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
I want to ask, how in the world did you ever get a book published in Japanese? What's that story about?
Well, the story is another bizarre story. Um, I have to fast forward because now Mel Copen is in my life. I had known Mel for almost 15 years. Earlier, we served on a bank board of directors for 10 years. And so we were good friends. We were very good friends. And then we were better friends. And then when he told me that he was going to have, he has an opportunity to move to Japan for 3 years to be at a university there, I said, I want to go. And so I thought about it. That was a very big risk, to say the least. And so um, I'm not going to talk about. Oh, we got married at our going away party, by the way. Just thought I'd mention that. And then we left the next week for Japan for 3 years. So I'm not going to talk about Japan for this period of time, but I will tell you that I did study the language, I studied the culture, and I got very involved in the community. So that is a part of the 3 year time period. So we're back now. I'm skipping 3 years, and we're back in Atlanta, Georgia. And um, I have a request 2 years later to go to back to Japan to help with a program, a 3 hour seminar in Tokyo. And I was going to be one of three presenters, and it was going to be on marketing and sales. And I said, I could do that. I know how to do that. So they paid me a all expenses were paid plus an honorarium. And so I zipped over to Japan. That's what you do. You just zip over. And so when I got there, um, I saw a whole room full of Japanese men and women, and I didn't see any other presenters. And I said, uh-oh. But so because I knew the culture, I knew what I could do and get away with it. So I went up to the podium and I wanted to explain to the people in the audience, in the seminar, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background and how it relates to marketing and sales. And so you will have an idea of how I can help you. And and then the rest of it's going to be questions and answers for you to ask what you want to know. And I realized that you don't really want to raise your hand and ask a question most of the time. So I've arranged for some paper and pen and pencils and stuff like that. And you can write out what you want to ask me, and I will answer it. And if you don't have anything that you want to ask, then you can go home. And I started, and everybody burst out laughing. And so I knew what I could say and get away with it. So 3 hours later, after a wonderful program, they were really thrilled about it. A woman came up to me and said, I am an editor in Diamond Publishing, the largest publisher in Tokyo. Beverly, I like the way you think. I wondered if you would write a book for us about and we would have it translated into Japanese and and we will publish it and distribute it. And I wanted to, she said, are you interested in doing that? And really wanted to jump up and down and shout, "Of course I'm interested in doing that." And I said, "Yes, I would be honored. And I thank you and I accept." And so it got written and it got published, and it was called It's Your Life, Isn't It? And it was published in Japan in Japanese.
So did it stay only in Japanese, or did you get other translations, and how did that happen?
What was happening in Japan was everything had changed. The bubble was bursting, and it was all about change. They didn't know how to manage change because they'd never had to before. So I was in Atlanta. It was during COVID, during 2019, 2020, 21. And and um, one second. And I found the manuscript that I had written for the Japanese book, in English, of course. And I read through it and I thought, this is very similar to me being something different. I think that could just change the Japanese examples to American global examples. And I think I would have another book, another different book that would be published in English. So I did that. I published it. I mean, I wrote the book called It's Your Life, Isn't It? The same as it was in Japanese. And there were no publishers at that point in time who were accepting, answering even the phone. So I had to self-publish, and I hired two people to help me with the parts I didn't know how to do. And so it was published, and it's Your Life, Isn't It? Making a difference starts with, I've got an idea. And that's how that book came about. And so I have a good friend in Ecuador, Sonia Roca, and she has a university, and she's the founder and the owner. And she and I and Mel were very good friends. Anyway, so I sent her a text over to Ecuador and said, "I have a new book. Do you want me to send to you? You want to read it? I'll send it to you." And so she said, "Yes, I would like to read it." And so I sent the book in PDF format over, in, email kind of thing. And then she said, about 2 or 3 weeks later, she said, "Beverly, I love the book. As a matter of fact, I want to have it translated into Spanish, and I want to publish it at my university and distribute it in my university. Is that okay with you?" And that's how it turned out to be another book in Spanish of It's Your Life, Isn't It? And so um, it's just amazing how something can be right in front of you, like my computer programming and reading the manuscript, and all of a sudden I had two books.
Amazing. I noticed that some people were doing things like raising their hand and wanting to ask. So I'll ask our viewers to please write something in the chat. And when you write something in the chat, we will see it, and then we'll offer at the very end, Beverly will have a chance to respond. So rather than raising your hand, we won't call on you right now, but just write it in the chat, okay? So I have a question. So that was books, and you had it translated, and everything worked great. So tell us something about how you started a whole different business, Women in Film, the Atlanta chapter. How did that happen?
Early on, when I was in the time after I took what was in the business of models and talent, um, and afterwards I got hired by the state of Georgia to be the person who, let me start over again. I was hired to make a plan to help build the motion picture industry in Georgia when Jimmy Carter was governor there. That came out better at that time. And And during that period of time, I was doing research, and I got the Hollywood Reporter to learn what was going on in Hollywood. And that was very useful because I read one in one of the magazines that there was a new organization that was brand new from T.C. Wilkinson Miles, who was the owner of the publication, and it was called Women in Film. And it was just a handful of people. And I said to myself, well, I've got an idea, because all I have to do when I next go out to California, I was the first film representative of Georgia, and so that was part of my responsibility to go out to Hollywood. So I did that. When I said when I go out there, I'm going to call her in advance and tell her I'm coming and ask for an appointment. And so on the next trip, I did that, and T.C. Wilkinson Miles came and picked me up in her yellow Rolls Royce, and we had a wonderful time together. And I asked her to tell me more about women in film, which she did. And I said, are you willing for me to start another chapter in Atlanta, Georgia? Because I would love to do that. And she said, absolutely, yes. And so that was exciting. And I did. And I hired, I invited someone to be my co-founder and help me get that underway. And so it became, to say an understatement, it became very successful. And at this point in time, there are over 60 chapters worldwide, and several over 100 women several thousand women. But in the I'm trying to I had a piece of information, so I'm sorry that I'm okay. Okay, there are now more than 12,000 members in over 40 chapters worldwide and throughout the world. And it has become an extraordinary feature, an extraordinary organization. And I feel like I started it. So I thought maybe you wanted to show that little film.
Right, something to be really proud of. And we'll now be showing a portion of your speech from the 30th anniversary, in which you stated what it takes to bring an idea to fruition and about taking risks. So I'm going to share that with everyone right now.
One of the skills that I learned along the way early in life was that visibility in public relations was the way to launch anything new when there was a story to tell. It thrills me to learn about the 44 chapters and 10,000 members worldwide. Thank you, Tishi, for your vision and your inspiration. I believe in living life beyond boundaries. My lifetime philosophy has been, why not? Often during the last 25 years, I've been invited to speak or conduct seminars around the world, in fascinating parts of the world. Most of the topics have been women in sales or women starting or building their own businesses. It has been a thrill, I assure you. In this phase of my life, I'm focusing on writing and photography, still hoping to make a difference. One project involves both of those interests, a photographic book with motivational themes designed for young teenagers. It is named Your Eyes Are Your Windows to the World. Let me mention 3 brief thoughts from this book that I believe reflect the theme of this evening. Number 1, you always have the power of choice. It is easy and cool to follow the leader. It takes vision and ideas to step out in front and become the leader. Number 2, set your own path. Decide what you want, visualize how you intend to do it, and then write down your action plan. And number 3, risk-taking is a vital part of life. And when you make a mistake, forgive yourself and move on. And now it's time for me to move on and express deep thanks to you, to each one of you, for caring about the past while focusing on the present and the future.
God bless you, Beverly. God bless you. So
I love that.
you spoke so beautifully, and you talked about taking risks. So I really have to ask, how is it possible that you took such a risk and it enabled you to meet a prime minister? Tell us what motivated you to want to meet her as a woman, and tell us that story.
The actual message that I wanted to have you about women in film was not only having the ideas, but planting seeds along the way and watching them grow. I think that was an important message that I wanted to convey. There was a story that I wrote that got accepted into Chicken Soup for the Soul. I'm sure that many of you have heard of that series, and it was accepted, and it was how I did something relating to the prime minister. So I'm going to take advantage of the time that I have right now and read you the actual story that I wrote. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. It is called A Unique Moment in Life. Life is filled with precious moments, precious memories. Those are the moments when you look back on an event and say, wow, what a great moment that was. It might be something as simple as when you received an educational degree where you really had to really struggle to make it. But there's one event in my life that helped me deeply understand that very few things in life are truly unreachable. If you have a vision, are willing to risk being laughed at, and are prepared for the consequences if you fail, that's part of risk taking. It happened to me in India in 1982. I was invited to go to India for a month, sponsored by the Indo-American Society in Bombay, India. My 2-day seminars programs were for Indian sales executives on advanced sales strategies. I read books about India. I talked with people who had been. This was my first major international assignment in many years. If I wanted my sales training program taken seriously, I had to be well prepared to understand the cross-cultural differences. During that research time, I gained a strong admiration for the leader of that huge country with more than 800 million people. It was a woman leader, Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. I had never been in a situation before where I might be able to see or possibly even meet such a powerful, dynamic woman. Yet the society in India was such a male-dominated culture. It was confusing to me to see how she came to have such incredible power. Um, Men must constantly surround her, I thought. I wanted to see if she would have any interest in being a part of a prestigious, elite, worldwide women's organization that was begun in the United States. Perhaps no one had ever asked her. About 2 months before my journey, I thought it would be beneficial if I could meet Mrs. Gandhi. No one knew, no one I knew could advise me at all. They actually kind of gave me you know, are you crazy? That kind of thing, and rolled their eyes a lot. So I did the most logical thing that I live and teach. I wrote her, I wrote her a letter. Yes, I wrote her a letter and asked for an appointment. In my letter, I asked for an appointment, the purpose of my trip, and included several additional things in the mail package that I was about to send to her. Naturally, I included credentials from both the mayor of Atlanta and the governor of Georgia, neither of whom I knew prior to that. I just called and explained the circumstances and asked for their help. I took a duplicate set of everything with me when I left for India. Upon my arrival in Bombay, India, I mentioned to my host, Mr. Krishnan, what I had done and asked if he would be so kind as to mail my duplicate letter set to Mrs. Gandhi in New Delhi. I asked if he would add a note saying I was now in India for a month and really looking forward to meeting her. In my letter, I had requested an appointment on a specific day and time, and I thought, if I'm going to be presumptuous, I might as well go all the way at a specific time and a specific day. My request was on the day that I had my program in New Delhi, one day before my return to the United States, after my 1 month of seminars and travel throughout India. Mr. Krishnan, needless to say, thought I was out of my mind. While trying to be polite, he asked if I knew how many hundreds of people try to see the Prime Minister every day. In their 10 years of experience of visiting experts coming to India, no one has ever gotten an appointment with the Prime Minister. I understand. I assured him that I did, and I would not be disappointed, and asked if he would please send the package. He was probably questioning his own judgment about inviting me. About a week later, Mr. Christian came into my program wearing a huge smile on his face. Actually, he kind of ran down the aisle, waving a telegram, confirming my appointment with Mrs. Gandhi on the day that I asked, at the time that I asked. From that moment forward, I was a hero in India. My seminar attendance grew and grew all over India. Almost everyone had heard the story. The day before my return to Atlanta was my scheduled meeting at her private residence. I knew that anything might happen to prevent this meeting, or that it would be a 60-second, I'm nice to have you nice to have met you, and that would be all. It was a far cry from that. I was ushered into her dining room. They did not even search me for weapons, which I thought was curious. Bypassing hundreds of people on the lawn and many seated in other rooms in her home. I had no idea of their business or political purpose to see her, nor of their importance. Moments later, she arrived, and we were left totally alone. Our meeting lasted almost 30 minutes. The conversation was incredibly diverse, poignant, revealing, and all for me. We spoke about my trip, my book, my work, my interest in mentoring and teaching women worldwide, of women's organizations, of her grandchildren, and her concern about nuclear weapons. And finally, I listened, enthralled by Mrs. Gandhi's description of what it was like to govern a huge nation with the diversity and enormous mushrooming population of India, with the majority of the population living in tiny rural villages. Those moments were magical. At times, I felt like I was off in a corner. It couldn't possibly be me. I'm just a career woman from Atlanta, Georgia. It couldn't be me. But there I was. That moment became real. This is important. This moment became real because I had an idea and believed it could happen and made a plan to make it happen. Let me repeat that. This moment became real because I had an idea and I believed it could happen, and I made a plan to make it happen. Before leaving, I asked if it would be possible to have a photograph taken with the two of us. I had a tiny camera in my purse. She reached under the table, pressed a button, and within less than 2 seconds, someone entered the room. A photographer was summoned, and the photo was taken with her camera, with their camera, and of course, with mine. For me, it was a life-changing experience and adventure. 1 year later, Indira Gandhi was assassinated in India by one of her own guards in the very home where we had met. On the wall of my home, right over there, I have a framed memory of the event we had, the telegram that I received, the photograph, and the cover of Time magazine. Her face on the cover with these words, "If I were to die tomorrow, not a drop of my blood would have been spilled."
Wow, that's a great story. I did show the picture. It's a little bit dark, but still we could see that you were there with Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. So how else did you express your interest in various cultures? I know that you've gone all over the world. Did you only write books, or was there another way that you expressed yourself?
Yes, I absolutely loved photography. I started becoming a professional photographer when I moved to Sedona, because I was 65 years old when I started a new career. And so that was, and I love taking pictures of people, how people work, how people play, how people live. And that is part of what makes that would be part of the book that we were talking about as well. But in the meantime, here are some of the pictures.
I'm showing from different countries. On your
Mhm.
website, of course, there are many, many more pictures. This is just a selection, and some from our own area. You'll notice uh, Cathedral Rock in silhouette over there,
Mhm.
from Venice.
Mhm.
And you even won an award, Sunset of the Century. I'm proud to have a copy of that in my giclée in my home, so thank you for that. Photography shows quite a range of your talent. And why don't you say something then more about this ebook for young teens, Your Eyes Are the Windows to the World? How did that book get published?
That book got published because I was at I was back in Atlanta, Georgia at that point in time. And the little place in Cumming, Georgia was we had a community meeting, and a lot of the people were wanting to know, how do I get to know some of these people who are from foreign countries who are living with us now, and they have businesses that we are able to go to, but we don't know how to talk to them. And so I was there and I said, I have an idea. I can make an exhibit using the photography that I have from all over the world, especially of people and how they work, how they live, how they play. And I will make an exhibit for us. And and then I was able to have it exhibited at a middle school in Cumming, Georgia, where the principal came over to me and said, when you have your exhibit, I will host it in my school. We have 1,000 students. And so that is what happened. I had this exhibit. And part of it was, in fact, using the photographs and that learning how to how to talk to people, how to talk to people and ask questions and listen to their answers. And then, not so long after that, this wonderful woman that I had mentioned before, Sonia Roca, doctor, who was in Ecuador, came to visit Mel Copen and me in Atlanta. And after she talked with Mel, she wanted to come up and see what I was up to. And I had my big poster boards because we finished with the exhibit. And she sat there looking at these huge poster boards with how people live, how people work, how people play, and doors and windows. I love to include that because people are often afraid to walk through doors. That's a fear factor, I learned. And and Sonia sat there quietly, and she said, "Okay, Beverly, here's what we're going to do. I'm asking you to write a book about what we've just been talking about, aimed at young people. And I'm going to have it published and translated into Spanish. She's in Ecuador, Spain. I mean, in Ecuador. And I'm going to have it published. I'm going to have it approved by the Minister of Education. And by the President of Ecuador. And be published and distributed all over the schools in Ecuador. And it almost worked. The plan almost worked because it was translated into Spanish. It was ready to be published. And the next step, when all of a sudden there was a big oops. The president, the Minister of Education, and the president got thrown out of office in a political coup. And there went our dream, our mission for publishing this book in Spanish and having it go all over in Ecuador. So it took a year for me. I mean, our dream was gone, but I didn't give up. I tried to find a publisher who would publish it in English, and I couldn't do it. And I just couldn't do it. I didn't have those kind of contacts. And finally, about 2 years later, a good friend in Sedona knew of a publisher, and she recommended it to me. And I went to them, and they published the book in English as an ebook. And it's not what I envisioned because I envisioned having a print book and having it spread out, but it has a whole complete educational component of how a teacher would go through the book and it would have how they could teach a whole class with it over a period of time. So maybe it's still available on Amazon.com. Maybe somebody out there would want to check it out, take a look at what it's all about. Maybe if they have a family with young people, get one and do the sessions with them, and so they will know how to talk to people around the world and how their eyes are their windows to the world.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for telling us how finally you got the book. You had patience, you didn't give up, and it happened. You've accomplished so much. You know, your friends are always commenting on how extraordinary and brave you are. Your very good friend, Terry Leigh Rouse, interviewed many of your friends, including me, and she compiled these glowing responses into a book, and it was called Why Not? She just took your phrase. Anything you want to say about that? I'll show the book.
Yeah, there is. Let me take a sip of water for a second. I had known Terry Leigh Rouse for over 10 years. And she came to, I was now living in Rome, Georgia. And she came, we had traveled together. We'd gone overseas to places. She lived in California. And she said, I actually came to see you this time. I normally would be just coming to see my dad and you, but she said, I've always wanted to write a book and I've never known what I wanted to write about. And now I know I want to write a book about your life. And I came here and asked your permission if in fact I could write the story of your life. And I first was kind of taken aback and I said, who would want to read it? Then I said, um, Terry, I'm humbly accept your offer. And I would be honored to do that. And so that was almost 3 years ago, Alicia. And it takes that long to write a book. She interviewed me over on Zoom for over 2 years. And everything was recorded. And then she interviewed all of the friends that I had. I mean, a few friends from Sedona. You were there. And Donna Michaels was interviewed, and David Gill, and all kind of people were interviewed who were in all over, who have been friends for some of my Yaya friends who have been friends and still have been for over 60 years. I like to keep friends for a long time. And so the book has now been published and is available on Amazon.com. Remember, Terry is the author, not me. But
Right.
it is such an honor to have someone write a book about your life. And I think that if anybody looks it up, and looks at some of the reviews that were posted, I felt very honored and pleased and thrilled at the kind of things that were being said about the book. So
I understand. That's really wonderful. So
I,
let's look
I
at
have,
some of the
but wait,
themes.
wait, wait, before we do that, I didn't tell people about the risk factor, how to deal with risk.
Well, we'll get to that in a minute. Let me just show some of the risks you did take. First of
Okay.
all, let's look at this beautiful picture of you at 16. Is that a great picture? And in a Japanese costume here, um, stating that you're an author, entrepreneur, photographer, and a citizen of the world. You really have proven that. Um, you were you did podcasts and you were on various forms of media talking about the kinds of things you're telling us today and that you told Terry in her book. A picture here with Jimmy Carter. And,
Jimmy Carter.
yep, and with some of your photography. So this collage just shows a tiny little sliver of the variety of things you've done in your businesses and with your talents. And it's just very inspiring for all of us. I'm going to stop the share and let you again say something about taking risks and what is important to you, because it's really very enlightening and inspiring for all of us. And then we'll open it up for some questions before we have the closing that you've chosen to have again, which is going to be to uplift and inspire all of our listeners.
Okay. Um, we all, I used to, I take risks all the time, but I guess the most important, I figured out how to manage risk. So I take two pieces of paper, and on one piece of paper, I write, what is the best thing that could happen if I do this idea and it works? And I would write down what the things are that the best things that could happen. And then on the other piece of paper, I actually write down what is the worst thing that can happen if it doesn't work. And it not fail, but it doesn't work. And I write down all the things that are the worst possible things. And then I study the things that are worst. And if I can deal with the worst possible thing that can happen, then it's a why not? Take it, move forward, and make a plan.
So in the Q&A feature, Jenny, do you see what the question is? Because I can only see the chat.
So one of our members asked if you had any recommendations about where where authors who are self-publishing could go to have their books promoted.
Yes, the answer is yes. There are some businesses nowadays, just a moment, please, that provide, um, I can storybook, and there's just several different companies that offer plans where they actually give you the questions, they interview you, and you write the answers. So you're really writing your story, but you don't have to come up with what do I ask for now. It's a wonderful series of questions, and I know many people around here where I'm living in Rome are using this Storyworth, I think is one of the ones. And if you put down writing your own story, you'll get, on questions, you'll get the name of several of them. Check them out, find out what they do, because it is a very worthwhile way to get your own story taken. And then they will send you one copy for yourself, and you can order however many you want. And so this isn't one that you would actually want to have a publisher who's going to publish it and promote it. This is not what I'm describing. What I'm describing is people who want to make a legacy for themselves. They want to write the story, and they want to be able to share it with their family, and and friends. So that is the kind of thing that Storyworth and things like that do help you. And so that is I have actually read one of my yayas. She did that, and while I was visiting with her, she said, I said, can I read it?" She said, "Yes, please read it, because nobody else has ever seen it." And so that's a really good way to tell your story and not have to think about what do I say.
Right. So that's if you want to tell your own story. What if someone has a book that they want to publish and they're looking for publishers? So there's Outlook, there's all different companies now that you can look at self-publishing, where you have a book that's kind of finished in manuscript form. That's kind of a different one.
Yes. The answer is you would have to find a publisher. That is very difficult to do if you have a novel, for example. All of my books are nonfiction. And so if it's a fiction book and you're writing a story or something of that nature, or story about somebody else, then the answer is you're going to have to do some homework. What you want to be careful about is the artificial intelligence, because that's kind of taken over and changing many things that are happening nowadays. So think if somebody says, "Well, I can do it for you in artificial AI," I don't think that's what you want. So the best way to write a story is to just start writing it. Just take out your little private notebook or make it a journal and start writing. And that's the best way to write a story.
Right. You mentioned something about having an idea. I know Joan Joinson wanted to know what you thought was most important, that is enlightening, in all of your books and all of your photography and all of your travels and all of your businesses. What is the thread that sort of ties it all together that you think is most important to tell other people?
Okay, I made a list. All I have to do is find it. Okay, the 4 key points. Ask questions. Ask a lot of questions and listen to the answers. Don't interrupt. I learned that specifically in Japan. Never interrupt. And so that is very important. And people will love you because you listen to them. And that's where you get a lot of context, a lot of information, is by asking a lot of questions and listening to the answers, and make notes. Make notes. The second is to think about planting seeds. Planting seeds is something that I have been doing all the time, because just like with women in film, if you see an idea and it's a brand new idea, and you think that could go somewhere, that's called planting a seed. And then you see if you can help it go along a little bit, a long way. I mean, so many things in Sedona have happened because somebody had an idea and then they made them happen. So that planting seeds is something I think is a part of everything that I've ever done. And then third is learn how to manage risk. And I told you about that, how to take the 2 pieces of paper and manage and decide whether or not the risk is you can deal with. If it doesn't work, then you can move forward. And that's how I manage risk. it makes it into a form that is easy to identify what are you afraid of? What is if you fail, people will laugh at me. All that time I've wasted. So decide what the worst possible thing that can happen is, and then make the decision of whether you can live with that. And then the fourth one is smile a lot. I live in a community of seniors here in Rome, Georgia, called the Spires the Spires at Berry College. And I wanted that one because it's right next to a college, and therefore it's always got on out. Lifelong learning is something that's very important to me. I have to be learning or I get bored. And so I love it when I mean, just last night, I was over there at an entrepreneurship class judging these young people who are creating ideas, and and going to present them to somebody. So I think that is a wonderful thing that have a college in where you're going to be living, or to always have lifelong learnings. And what the point was, I have been told many times that I'm the only person they know who always is smiling. And I think when I smile, it makes people feel better. And they tell me
Wonderful.
that.
Not only smile, but your wonderful laughter. So
Yeah. Oh,
why don't you repeat? Yes, I've always enjoyed your laughter. How about you just give those 4 points again, just to review?
okay. One, ask a lot of questions and listen to the answers. Two, plant seeds along the way. Three, learn how to manage risk. And four, smile a lot.
Wonderful. I always need a review because I can't quite remember and call it up as I would like to.
Yeah, yeah.
Just want a comment. Anyone who wants to self-publish can look up different self-publishing companies when you have a manuscript, and you should find someone you feel comfortable with based on what you can afford, and watch for too many requests for marketing dollars, because not every company is the same. We can talk about that another time.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really important. And read reviews. If you
Yes.
yeah, read reviews of what is said about them, and go to Better Business Bureau and check it out, because you have to do that. You have to do that.
You see that? That was considering a risk right there. And
Yeah.
so Bev said, sure, you can research it and you can find it. And then but check them out. Read
Mhm.
the reviews. You have to be realistic. You can't only say, I have an idea and then go lolly, lolly, lolly. You have
Uh-huh.
to be realistic about the risks and the possibility, the downside as well. So that's
Mhm.
very helpful that you've said that. Are there any questions in the question and answer? I don't see any others in the chat. Jenny?
No, there's no more questions in the Q&A either.
Wonderful. So I'm sure that we'll hear from you, and we have your contact information if anyone wants to talk to you after this. But I know that you want to close, Beverly, with some words of wisdom, and I'll show those slides, which then you will read, and they really are great lessons for all of us.
Okay. This is something that I wrote at least 30 years ago, and I've been living by it. That was one of the questions you asked. What do I live by? The power of choice. Regardless of your position in life, your circumstances, or the challenges you are faced with every day, you and I have the most important freedoms in the world. We can see, feel, say, study, write, think, or be anything we choose. It's ours for the taking. Every day, in every situation, you and I have choices and options. We can choose to be negative, or we can choose to be positive. We can choose to be angry, or we can choose to be peaceful. We can choose to be resentful, or we can choose to be grateful. We can lash out, and say, why me? Or we can reach out and help someone else. The power of choice is in your attitude. Life is too short, precarious, and fragile. Your attitude is the one ingredient that will turn around your day, your week, and your life. That is your choice, yours alone. So remember, making a difference starts with, I have an idea. I am grateful to you, Rabbi Alicia, for all that you have done to make this series of programs, educational programs available. It's just so powerful. And you had the idea and you made a plan for making it happen. You're living by what I believe in.
Truly, I said, I'll ask Beverly, why not? So
Mhm,
thank you so much for sharing just a few stories from your amazing life. And I thank all of you who decided to come and view this
mhm.
because it's inspiring and it gets past our own barriers that are often self-made. You've given such great advice. Um, and I really, really thank you so much for joining us here in Sedona. Part of you always feels at home here. I know that.
Mhm. 15 years there.
Oh,
Yeah,
fantastic.
15 years in Sedona.
So I wish all of you to take your ideas, write them in a notebook, um, take this advice, say why not, and then write Beverly and tell her what you did because she loves good stories, don't you, Bev?
I do. Hmm.
So feel that warmth and that support, that encouragement.
Oh, oh, I forgot to tell you something.
What did you forget to tell us?
Well, sometimes people say, well, what are you, I'm 88 years old. What are you doing lately? And
Ah,
so there is something that I'm doing lately. Do I have time to mention it?
you do. Tell us what you're writing.
Okay. Um, I, 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 I'm writing a column in a local newspaper. And the reason I am because I had an idea. And I asked somebody if they know somebody. I did a speech at a Rotary Club and asked if she knows who's in charge there. I called him and said, I'm an author. I've done this, and that. And I wondered if you might want a columnist. And he said, hold on a minute, I'll put you in touch with the city editor. And she became my city editor. And this is a year and a half later now. I've been writing a column on anything I want to for every other week. And at 600 words, that's my minimum. And I talk about anything not political, not religious, it's always uplifting. And so my point is, my hope is that it published every 2 weeks in the Rome paper, and then I also post it online. And therefore, I have a wonderful following that I never ever knew about. And more importantly, they tell me how much the stories mean to them. And so I thought that was really, really
What is
special.
it called? How can it be looked up?
Well, it's the Rome. The answer is that wouldn't be practical because it's a local news the paper and it was online and it's hard to read. But I do post them every time one comes on Facebook. And so they could want to friend me, and then I would post that each one. But I'm thinking of doing a little booklet. I'll tell you why. Uh, I think this is important. Um, I live in this community, it's a wonderful place at the Spires, and there are 200 or 300 people here. And you obviously don't know everybody, but I've been here almost 5 years. And last week, I was in this big room where we have all the big events, and a woman in a wheelchair kind of came in the door, and I said, I was in the back of the room. The event hadn't started yet. And I said, my name, um, um, and I'm Beverly. And she said, I know who you are. That's exactly what I did. She said, you write columns for the newspaper. I read your columns. I love reading them. and I love what you stand for. I thought, oh my, that's, I didn't realize that I could be impacting people by just writing a little column every 2 weeks. So I'm thinking, based on that, that I'm thinking of maybe taking a couple of dozen of my favorite columns and getting them published together, make to a quick print, not published, and seeing if people want them. I could send you the copies, and also I send them out to people who don't do Facebook, limited, like my grandchildren and things like that. I send them, and and I was thinking that we have a healthcare unit here where we are, and there's all kind of different levels of healthcare. I was thinking of offering to take my column and see if they would be interested in my reading to them maybe once a week or something like that.
Look at how many ways you've touched people and you didn't even realize it.
Yeah.
I find that very moving. You can also find a way to put them on your website so that anyone can click in.
Oh.
There's another idea. So I moved at this moment really to thank you and to offer a blessing. And the blessing is one of, actually, there are two blessings. One is very rarely used, and it's the blessing for someone who is good and does good. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hatov v'hameitiv. Blessed are you, Holy One, who is good and does good. And you say this at times when you meet someone who is inspiring as you are. And also Shehechianu, just this is a moment, this moment that you shared with us. And I again felt your presence. A little verklempt here. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Holy One of blessing, your presence fills creation. Thank you for giving us life and sustaining us, and sustaining Beverly for all of her 88 years. May she have many more till 120, and giving us this very great moment that we shared together. Give me an amen.
Amen.
Okay, thank you all. Shalom.